In this video, I'll be continuing with my discussion on Kant's section that's titled "The System of the Principles of the Pure Understanding," the systematic representation of all these synthetic principles of the pure understanding. And so in this we talked about the axioms of intuition, the anticipations of perception, and the analogies of experience. So the analogies of experience was kind of the big part, the bread and butter of this section of the book. But now we're going to talk about the postulates of empirical thought in general. And this has to do with modality, which is possibility, actuality, and necessity. And in this section, it will mostly be covering the possible and the actual, because Kant in this particular section doesn't actually discuss necessity that much, but he uses this section as a sort of lead into his refutation of idealism. But so in this one, we'll be looking at these three postulates here. So these are the three postulates of empirical thought in general. And so number one is that which agrees with the formal conditions of experience in intuition and in concepts is possible. So what he essentially means there is that if it's something that you could imagine, that it's not sort of contradictory, and that it forms with space and time, so in intuition and with the concepts that we've been discussing, then it's possible. So number two, that which is connected with the material conditions of experience, or in other words, with sensation, is actual. Then number three, that the connection of which with the actual is determined in accordance with universal conditions of experience is, in other words, exists as necessary. And so necessary things I'll get into probably in a future video. In this one, we'll be talking pretty much about possible and actual. All right, and so the categories of modality, so the categories of understanding, which are modality, possibility, actuality, and necessity, which is what we're talking about here, have the peculiarity that in determining an object, they do not in the least expand the concept to which they are attached as predicates. They only express the relation of the object to our faculty of knowledge. And so you can kind of see where Kant is going towards one of his refutations of the argument for the existence of God, that essentially says that the greatest being in the universe would be greater if it existed, therefore it must exist. And Kant refutes this by saying that existence isn't, some thing that adds something to the object, but is merely the relation of the object to our faculty of knowledge. And so this is kind of building up to that idea that being in existence, that existing, that actually existing is not some property that a thing has, but is just a relation of the object to our faculty of knowledge. And so Kant says when the concept of an object is complete, we can still ask, is the object possible? And if so, is it actual? And then if so, is it necessary? And so this is kind of the steps you would go through getting through the modality of the object. All right, so let's look at possibility. So Kant has a line in here, and I've kind of split it up between the possibility and the actuality here. So the first part is when a concept can precede its perception, then it's possible. So you can conceive of something before you actually observe it in some way, and so that is what possibility is. So possibility is empirical. It requires the form of experience such as space and not just logical. So determining the logical possibility of a concept, which essentially just means that it doesn't contain any contradictions. Something that doesn't contain contradictions is said to be logically possible. But he says that determining the logical possibility of a concept is not sufficient to establish the objective reality of the concept. The impossibility, and he gives this is an example that Kant gives. So the impossibility of two straight lines completely enclosing the middle. So if we think of two straight lines, even if we allow them to intersect, so we have two straight lines here, there is nothing enclosed here. But Kant says that the impossibility of two straight lines being completely enclosing the middle is only impossible when considering the lines in space, which is a form of the a priori experience. And so just saying, you know, like essentially it's not impossible to say the space enclosed by two straight lines. It's only impossible when we consider it as lines in space. And so we need this a priori form of experience in order for it to be contradictory. And so we are able to know and characterize the possibility of things without any previous experience, but can do so merely with reference to those formal conditions under which anything at all is determined as an object of experience. And that's essentially what I was saying up here in these bulleted points, is saying that only when we consider things in reference to the formal conditions under which anything is determined as an object of experience can we characterize something as possible, as essentially being logically possible. Therefore, we can do so entirely a priori, but nevertheless only in reference to experience within its limits. And so like I said, Kant kind of he spends most of this relatively small section of the book on possibility and essentially trying to show these two things here, that you can only characterize something, the possibility of a thing, with reference to the experience, with the formal conditions under which anything at all is determined as an object of experience. Therefore, we can do so entirely a priori, but nevertheless only in reference to experience and within its limits. And so that is what Kant is saying of possibility. Remember, possibility is when a concept can precede its perception. And then so we get to actuality. So actuality is when a perception can precede its concept. In other words, you could observe something before you ever even knew that it actually existed. And that is sort of the hallmark of what actuality is, whereas possibility means that it's possible that you could come up with a concept of it before ever actually observing that object. So in a mere concept of a thing, no sign of its existence can be discovered. So this is once again Kant sort of harping on this idea that existence is not some predicate, not some property of things. For although the concept be ever so complete, so that no thing should be wanting in it to enable us to think the thing with all its determinations, existence has nothing to do with this. So existence has to do only with the question of whether such a thing be given to us, such that its perception even precede its concept. And so these right here are sort of, once again, harping on that point about how existence is not sort of a property that things can have. So perception, which supplies the material for the concept, is the sole mark of actuality. And so that kind of goes back to this idea that you can perceive something before you ever even had a concept of it. So it is possible to know its existence even before the perception, as I said, provided it be bound up with some perceptions. In accordance with the principles of empirical connection, the analogies. And so it's possible to know the existence even before the perception. Uh, so, think of like a unicorn. So it's taking a horse and, the horn thing and sort of bringing those two together, sort of combining those two things together so that we uh, come up with the sort of the logical possibility of its existence, even though we've never seen a unicorn, because it's bound up with some perceptions, such as our perception of a horse and the perception of a horn. So, in accordance with the principles of empirical connection, so the analogies of experience. All right, so wherever, therefore, perception and its attachments reach according to empirical laws, uh, there also reach our knowledge of the existence of things. But if we do not begin with experience, or do not proceed according to the laws of empirical connection by appearances, we are only making a vain display in wanting to guess and explore the existence of anything. An important protest, however, against these rules for proving the existence immediately is brought forward by idealism and is the proper place for this refutation. And so the next section, so this is the last line of this section. So as I said, this is kind of a lead into his refutation of idealism, which is, sort of the humane idea that cause and effect, for instance, is essentially just a habit that we've seen A precede B often enough that we just sort of assume that A is causing B, and Kant wants to refute that. But anyway, let's kind of break this down. So wherever, therefore, perception and its attachments reach, according to empirical laws, there also reach our knowledge of the existence of things. And so this is saying that the perception and its attachments, so sort of the outside world, or the things that we are looking at, so are being reached according to the empirical laws, things like space and time. They're also reach our knowledge of the existence of things. So, we have to, the existence of things are things that we can perceive before we can conceive of them. But if we do not begin with experience, or do not proceed according to the laws of empirical connection of appearances, we are only making a vain display in wanting to guess and explore the existence of anything. And so he's saying that we need to use like his analogies of experience, for instance, in order to actually understand the actual existence of a thing. But anyway, that is Kant's postulates of empirical thought in general, which covers these modal ideas of possibility and actuality. And so I think kind of the take-home message are these two lines here. The possibility is when a concept can precede its perception, and actuality is when a perception can precede the concept. And so that's sort of the simplified take-home message of this video. And in the next one in my Kant playlist, I'll be talking about his refutation of idealism. So I hope you found this video helpful and interesting, and I will see you in the next video.